We're going to focus like a laser beam in creating jobs right here at home because that's our first priority.
Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
House of Representatives session just getting underway on this Friday morning. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back at 7 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.
Even united, we stand before you very vulnerable. Today we pray for our families, friends, and constituents out in the Pacific and its surrounding coasts. Be with these island people who touch the members and delegates of this Congress and have represented them always, even in their hour of need. From our depths, O Lord, we cry out, have mercy, O Lord, have mercy. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof, and pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly.
If the House will rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 5 one-minute requests from each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, Ashton Klein McMurray, a 16-year-old kid with cerebral palsy, was walking home from a football game in Massachusetts when he was ambushed, beaten, stabbed, and murdered. One of the killers, Long Eng, an illegal from Cambodia, was sent to prison. Ashton's family was promised this murderer would then be deported back to Cambodia after serving the sentence. But he never was. Why? Because Cambodia and other nations refused to take back their convicted felons from the United States. So the assassin, by U.S. law, has been released on the streets of America. He is still illegally here. Mr. Speaker, there are over 140,000 criminal aliens in the United States like Eng that have been sent to prison, ordered deported, and their native nation stalls, delays, and eventually refuses to take these outlaws back. So they're running loose in the United States. The worst offending nations are Cuba, China, India, Pakistan, and Jamaica. The United States should consider cutting aid and stopping visas to a nation that won't take their criminals back. And maybe that will get their attention, and they will take their people home. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge my colleagues to co-sponsor the Reduce Unnecessary Spending Act of 2011. Many decisions made over the past decade on both sides of the aisle contributed to the nation's untenable debt. The Reduce Unnecessary Spending Act provides another deficit reduction tool to eliminate unnecessary spending. It grants the President expedited rescission authority to create another opportunity to reduce spending and provide a strong incentive for Congress to work together to trim unnecessary spending and dedicate all spending cuts to deficit reduction. Expedited rescission is a well-known concept with bipartisan support. The Budget Committee's current chairman, Mr. Ryan, introduced expedited rescission in the 110th Congress. Senator John McCain and Senator Tom Carper introduced similar legislation this year with 32 bipartisan co-sponsors. Exercising fiscal responsibility requires strong discipline and a commitment to cutting unnecessary spending. Expedited rescission provides another layer of spending cuts and another opportunity for deficit reduction. I urge my colleagues to co-sponsor the legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, you've heard it said many times, energy is jobs. Energy is jobs. We have a wealth of resources in our nation, oil, natural gas, and coal. Yet we see gas prices rising to unbelievable rates here in America, approaching in many places in excess of $4 a gallon. And what are we doing about it? Not very much. We've got a permitting process that is failing America. And we have an opportunity today to show America just how bad that problem is. Later today, I'm going to be introducing a bill called the Road to Jobs Act. It stands for Regulatory Openness, Accountability, and Disclosure. And we're going to show the American people through a report that's going to be required from the Council on Environmental Quality just how flawed that permitting process is, requiring them to show the permits that are in cycle and what the economic implications are of not authorizing permits to go after America's
The gentleman's
resources.
time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Pennsylvania rise? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Last week, we saw real signs of economic recovery when the unemployment rate dropped below 9% for the first time in 2 years. This is encouraging news, but we still have a long way to go to promote private sector growth. But Republicans are digging their heels in on billions of dollars of reckless cuts that threaten our economic growth and put 700,000 American jobs at risk. We agree spending cuts are necessary to reduce the deficit. This is not about whether to cut or not. This is about where to cut, how much to cut, and how fast to cut. The Republican agenda threatens our core obligations to our seniors, to our safety, and to our future. We need disciplined budgeting, we need targeted cuts that won't hurt our economy, and we need strategic investments to make America competitive for future generations. Republicans are putting partisan politics ahead of American priorities. Instead of enacting job-destroying cuts, we should be focusing on job creation and sound budgeting. Enough is enough. It's time to get serious and pass a responsible spending plan that grows the economy and invests in the future.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to commend the work of the U.S.-India Business Council. Founded in 1975, the primary mission of the Usibc is to strengthen bilateral investments and trade between our two great nations. America and India now share $50 billion in annual trade that mutually benefits both countries. Our two democracies, the world's largest and the world's oldest, have held joint military exercises, increased two-way tourism, and have engaged in bilateral cooperation on many fronts, including the global war on terrorism. Thanks to the leadership of President Ron Summers, the USIBC, hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, has grown to 400 member companies creating jobs in America. Indian businesses have invested billions across the nation, including Middle Steel in Georgetown, South Carolina. For 36 years, USIBC has opened the doors of American businesses in India, creating jobs in both countries as strategic partners. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and I will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism. I cherish the memory of Addison Morton Graves, who passed away 50 years ago on March 8th.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the hundreds of cyclists, parents, business people, especially bike industry leaders who flooded Capitol Hill this week with a message of bike partisanship, addressing the issues found on the front page every day in our newspapers about what would happen if we were made it easier to use the most efficient form of urban transportation ever designed. It would make a huge difference on the health of our families, dealing with traffic congestion and air pollution, reduce the tyranny of our addiction to oil if we burn calories instead of fossil fuel. It's also big business. Billions of dollars are made from the sales, service, manufacturing, and bike tourism. And most important, it makes our communities more livable, our families safer, healthier, and more economically secure. Thank you, cycling advocates, for your positive message of hope. I hope that it found receptive ears here on Capitol Hill.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we're engaged in a process now over the next week to decide how we're going to fund the government for the next few months and for the next year. Republicans have already decided where they want to put the burden of the cuts that we all know we have to make in the budget. They want to put it on the least fortunate in our country. Well, let me read something from the Washington Post this week, Harold Meyerson. Mark Whitehouse of the Wall Street Journal looked at how businesses were dividing up the pie 18 months into every previous recovery since 1947 and found that 58% of their increases in productivity trickled down to their workers in increased wages. What's happened today? It's the other way around. Only 6% of productivity gains have gone to our newly more productive workers. In other words, our people, our working families have already paid the price. What have the corporations and businesses done with that profit that they made? Mostly they're buying their stock back. More than 100 and 200% of additional stock purchases back. They're not hiring people. They're not investing in research. So as we decide where we're going to tighten the belt as we move forward on our budget, let's make sure we tighten it on the fat cats as well as the people who have already been strangled.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, it is difficult to sit and not say anything about how we are damaging our future. We cannot consider the kind of cuts that are proposed to our future and think that this country will be prosperous. This plan eliminates the funding for math and science partnerships. We must make strategic investments in STEM education in order to maintain a competitive workforce. But this plan eliminates Even Start, reading is fundamental, and striving reading. It cuts more than $1 billion from Head Start. This represents a massive setback for youth who are most in need. This plan is especially damaging for our youngest children just beginning their academic careers. These children will fall behind before they even get started. So Reading is Fundamental program has provided books for young children whose families cannot afford them. Mr. Speaker, we must not allow our country to continue to fall behind in competitiveness. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 days to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 836.
Without objection. Pursuant to House Resolution 151 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 836. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Westmoreland, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 836, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to rescind the unobligated funding for the Emergency Mortgage Relief Program and to terminate the program.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hensling, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, the American people woke up several days ago to the very sad reality that this nation has just incurred its single largest monthly deficit in the history of the nation. $226 billion, which a back-of-the-envelope calculation, roughly $2,500 for every household in just 1 month. And, Mr. Chairman, February's the shortest month of the year. This is on top of our nation's first $1 trillion deficit, our nation's second $1 trillion deficit, and now, according to the budget presented by the President of the United States, the largest deficit in America's history and the third $1 trillion plus deficit. Mr. Chairman, the nation is drowning in a sea of red ink. If we want to help job creators create jobs today, we've got to start taking away the uncertainty of this huge national debt. If we want to save our children from bankruptcy tomorrow, we've got to start doing something about the national debt. But everybody says, essentially, well, not in my backyard, not with my programs, not today. Let's do it some other day. Let's kick the can down the road. But, Mr. Chairman, this is a nation that is borrowing 40 cents on the dollar, much of it from the Chinese, and we are sending the bill to our children and grandchildren. This is a form of intergenerational theft. The Democratic whip, the gentleman from Maryland, when Republicans were in control, and the deficit was a fraction of what it is today, he termed it fiscal child abuse. Mr. Hoyer, the gentleman from Maryland, said that when the annual deficit was $200 billion. Now the monthly deficit is $200 billion. If we want to help create jobs today, if we want to spare our children bankruptcy, we got to quit spending money we don't have. And so this week, Mr. Chairman, House Republicans have brought a couple of bills to the floor to do something that is rarely ever done in this institution, and that is to save American families and save small businesses money. Terminate a program. You know, as we're coming off the 100th anniversary of Ronald Reagan's birthday, I'm reminded, and perhaps I don't have the quote exact, but he said something along the lines of the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a federal program. So the bill we have before us today is a program that was originally authorized in 1975 and was never funded in its 35-year history. Now, $1 billion has now been allocated for this program. It's not out the door. Nobody's used that money. It's in a series of so-called foreclosure mitigation programs that the administration has put forth, almost all of which have been abject failures, even by their own yardstick, by their own measurement. Number one, the best foreclosure mitigation program in America is a job. It's a paycheck. It's not a government check. It's a paycheck. Job creators are hampered by the uncertainty of the national debt. Historic levels of debt will lead to historic levels of taxation, which leads to historic levels of unemployment. The equation could not be more true, could not be more elementary. But don't take my word for it, Mr. Chairman. Let's hear from some of the job creators in America. Let's hear from the CEO of Caterpillar, which employs tens of thousands of people across our nation. Quote, unfunded entitlement programs coupled with the coming wave of retiring baby boomers will push the deficit to untenable levels. It is a train wreck. Mike Jackson, CEO, AutoNation, 19,000 employees. Quote, "The best thing that this town could do to help the economic recovery become sustainable is to deal with the deficit." Bernie Marcus, former chairman and CEO of Home Depot, over 200,000 employees in the U.S. If we continue this kind of policy, we are dead in the water. Business people, they don't know what's coming. The debt, the budget, this debt we have is in the trillions. I'm going to have to pay for this somehow. You know, Mr. Chairman, these are just a few of the voices of job creators. And so I'm heartened to see that the unemployment rate has ticked down last month. Frankly, it is attributable mostly to the fact that we now have divided government. Job creators now know there's at least some check on the excesses of the Obama administration. It is a testament to the fact that at the end of the last Congress, Republicans were successful in blocking, at least for 2 years, the single largest tax increase in America's history. And I don't know any American who believes that if you increase taxes on their company that that's going to lead to a raise, a bonus, employing more workers. And finally, we have what Warren Buffett calls the regenerative nature of the free enterprise system. This is an economy that wants to recover, but since the Great Depression, we've never had a longer recession or a more tepid recovery, and it's due to the policies of the President and the previous Democratic Congresses. And so if we want to help create jobs today, we're going to have to show that we can put the nation on a fiscally sustainable path. Now, this is a $1 billion program where not $1 has left the door yet. And I'm sitting here thinking, Mr. Chairman, if this body, after having 75, 76 some odd different government housing programs that add up to roughly 56 some odd billion dollars, that frankly have grown at an exponential over the family budget has to pay for the HUD budget. If we can't terminate, in order to save our children from bankruptcy, in order to help create jobs, one program at $1 billion where not one penny has left the door, how are we ever going to make the tough decisions that are necessary to save the country from bankruptcy? Mr. Chairman, at some point you got to quit spending money you don't have. At some point, when do you ever say enough's enough? We're tired of borrowing money from the Chinese. Is it the future of our children? Is it their destiny to shine the shoes of the Chinese? Is it our children's destiny that one day they'll wait tables for the Chinese? It's not the dream I have for my 7-year-old son. It's not the dream I have for my 9-year-old daughter. It's not the American dream. The American dream is to leave your children with greater freedoms, greater opportunity, and a higher standard of living. That's what I believe the American dream is. And if we can't terminate one program, which the Obama administration itself says we're going to lose 98 cents on the dollar. I didn't say it, was the Obama administration that said it. Losing 98 cents on the dollar. If we can't do this, Mr. Chairman, I have great fear and great trepidation for the future. So I urge my colleagues to take one small, teeny, tiny baby step towards the path of fiscal sustainability. Take one measured baby step and tell job creators in America, we're going to put the nation's fiscal house in order. Go ahead. It's safe to invest in America again. It's safe to create jobs. We're going to get this done. Take one tiny step today to help create those jobs and save our children from a pathway to bankruptcy. I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Frank, is recognized for 30 minutes.
I yield myself such time as I may consume, and I hope members will be careful walking on the floor right now, especially on the Republican side of the aisle, because I wouldn't want anyone to fall into the enormous gap that has just been created between the gentleman's comments and his voting record. we heard a great argument about the need to cut the budget deficit and stop spending. During the recent debate on the budget, an amendment was offered to limit entitlement spending to farmers to $250,000 per entity. The amendment said no agricultural entity, no individual could get more than $250,000 per year. It was defeated by the Republican Party. A majority of Democrats voted for it. It will cost $1 billion over 10 years at least. We had the Brazilian cotton farmers. Now, my friends on the other side hate for me to mention that because unpleasant reality is always bothersome. But, you know, over a 4-year period, we're going to spend more money subsidizing American and Brazilian cotton farmers than we are on this program. Now, the gentleman from Alabama said yesterday that it was Obama that made him do it. Rather implausibly, he argued that he was compelled to follow this recommendation of the Obama administration to send $150 million a year to Brazilian cotton farmers for 4 years because the president told them to do it. Well, that's a very selective invocation of the president. I must say no more persuasive than Flip Wilson having invoked the devil as having made him do it. And, of course, there are sometimes analogies in the way in which they refer to the president. $150 million. Now, the argument, by the way, was that we have to send $150 million to Brazilian cotton farmers. The gentleman voted for it because otherwise we would be in trouble with the World Trade Organization. But we could have saved that $150 million to the Brazilians by not sending $150 million to American cotton farmers. And by the way, that would include American cotton farmers who could get more than $250,000 a year. So we're not debating about whether or not we should reduce the deficit. It is how. Do you exempt agriculture, as many of my friends do, because they represent agricultural districts? And the product conservatism, the free market, that's got no application to the growth of cotton or grain or many of these other programs that receive so much money. Beyond that, we have the military. Now, we're talking here about trying to stop a serious economic problem in American cities. Well, we can't afford that. But $400 million was voted to be spent on infrastructure in Afghanistan. I do not think that $400 million will be very well spent. I understand some national security needs. I think that war's gone on too long. But the notion of sending $400 million to build up the cities in Afghanistan and deny help in America makes no sense. We are also being told that we can send $1.2 billion for Iraqi security forces. Over and above what we spend on the American military, we're sending $1.2 billion. I voted against that. Members on the other side voted for it. The whole war in Iraq, an enormous waste, in my judgment, of American money at the cost of American lives. Brave young Americans went to war when they were asked to by their country, but it was a mistake for them to be sent there. The war in Iraq has so dwarfed any domestic expenditures in this area that I do not understand how members can, on the one hand, talk seriously about cutting the deficit and then have voted for more and more and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars for that war in Iraq. And now we have another point that should be made. It is true, this $1 billion that we're asking for, and by the way, it will cost, according to CBO, $840 million. Not 98% in total expenditure, 84%. Still a high number, but $140 million is $140 million. So this will cost $840 million, according to CBO, if it is fully run. And it is going to come out of the Treasury right now. But let's be clear. The reason it will come out of the Treasury, as we try to deal with this, by the way, here's what the program is. It says to Americans who took out mortgages and became unemployed that we will help them pay their mortgage because you can't afford mortgage payments out of unemployment compensation. That's the lavishness of this program. We're taking people who are in trouble and facing losing their homes and having more foreclosures, which have negative effects not just on the individual foreclosed, but on the neighborhood, on the city, on the whole economy. So this has a macroeconomic impact. But we are going to come to their assistance. In the financial reform bill passed last summer, we in the conference committee voted to take this money from an assessment on the largest financial institutions. We voted that financial institutions with $50 billion or more in assets and hedge funds with $10 billion or more in assets would have to pay for this. And our logic was that it was the activity of these institutions that caused the crisis that led to the unemployment and led to the foreclosures. Many of them profited from it. And we then had the TARP, and this is money that we voted in the TARP and another set of programs, and we said, you benefited from intervention. We didn't do it because we loved you. We did it because we had to save the economy from going upside down. I know members like to rail about bailouts. Of course, everything, let's be very clear, every activity in the United States known as a bailout recently was in the initiative of the George Bush administration, of Mr. Paulson and Mr. Bernanke, and they were bipartisanly supported, and I agree that we had to do them. We had to do them because of failures in past regulatory policy. But the fact is that in the bill we passed last summer, this money wouldn't have come from the Treasury. It wouldn't have added to the deficit. It would have been recouped from an assessment on large financial institutions. The Republican Party blocked it. Not here. They didn't have the votes here, as we don't often have the votes today, but in the Senate. So I will make this announcement. I plan to reintroduce next week the provision of the financial reform bill that would have taken the money for this program and other programs to alleviate the impact of foreclosure. The Neighborhood Stabilization Program that helps get foreclosed property back into productive use, aid to the homeowners who are unemployed, and pay for it as we tried to do last July, but Republican opposition stopped us, not from the taxpayer, but from the large institutions. And I don't mean to demonize, but I think Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo and the Bank of America and Citicorp and Morgan Stanley and the large hedge funds, I think they can pay for this. That's what we would have done. So I agree, this should not come from the taxpayer. By the way, with regard to the bill we debated yesterday, and I regret not pointing this out, but you know, you can only correct so much error in a limited amount of time. I talk fast, but error outpaces me when we get into these debates. We were talking yesterday about money that was going to be spent in another program, the FHA refi, and people talked about $8 billion. Yes, $8 billion, it won't cost $8 billion, but $8 billion that was set aside, if necessary, from the TARP. And people said that TARP money was promised to go back to the taxpayers. It was, and here's how. Members may have forgotten this, having voted for it. But in the TARP legislation, we added a provision that said in 2013, when the TARP is concluded, the President at that time is mandated to send to the Congress a bill that would recoup the funds that had not been returned to the Treasury from those large financial institutions. And we reiterated that in the financial reform bill over the Republicans' objections. So the point is this. The TARP money that will be spent, if it is on the refinancing, and the TARP money that would be spent on the HAMP program will not come out of the Treasury. It will be reimbursed to the Treasury, if my colleagues on the other side go along with what we voted for, from the large financial institutions. So let's be very clear. Whether we are talking about the programs in the financial reform bill or the programs in the TARP, they are a package of programs to deal with the consequences of foreclosure. I must say, I saw a draft of my Republican colleagues' budget views, and they said, astonishingly, that spending TARP money to deal with foreclosures was inappropriate because those were unrelated to the financial crisis. Foreclosures unrelated to the financial crisis? That is an illogic that I am surprised at. Ideology drives you to certain ridiculous conclusions, but that one goes further into that than I would have thought. So let's again be very clear. Our proposals are that the large financial institutions, assets of $50 billion or more, hedge funds of $10 billion or more, most of which were direct beneficiaries of our activity in dealing with the financial crisis that many of them helped cause, that's how we will fund these programs. So with regard to the HAMP, with regard to the FHA refinance, no, that will not come out of the Treasury. That will be reimbursed ultimately. Yes, the TARP money goes back, and the law calls for that to be assessed. And so, yes, I understand my Republican colleagues. They don't want Goldman Sachs or Citicorp or any of the large financial institutions or any of the large hedge funds to have to pay the cost. But that's what the debate is, not the Treasury and the average taxpayer versus alleviation of foreclosure, the large financial institutions. And, yeah, they did succeed, temporarily I hope, in changing that. They knocked out of our bill a requirement that the large financial institutions would help us mitigate foreclosures and help us have cities buy up property that is rotting and causing trouble. And unfortunately, temporarily, that's not the case. But I will file the bill next week. And given their concern for the taxpayer and the deficit, they'll have a choice. Do you add the cost of these programs to the deficit? Because they're not going to become law, these repealers. The President's going to veto them. The Senate won't pass them even for him to do that. Are you then going to say that it will come out of the deficit? Or will you join us in taking it from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and the Bank of America, and those are reasonable institutions that do a lot of good work, but they can afford this $1 billion. Their bonuses alone would pay for these programs. So let's be clear what the choice is. First of all, we have people who are prepared to send money to Brazilian cotton farmers so they can send money to American cotton farmers. They will not limit entitlements to agricultural individuals to $250,000 a year. They'll send billions to Afghanistan and Iraq that will be wasted, not for our defense, but to build up their infrastructure and their security. And then, when it does come to the relatively small amounts we will be spending on some of these programs, like $840 million here, and that's small compared to what they spend elsewhere, for instance, in their wars, they would rather have it come out of the taxpayer. They would rather not spend it at all. But if they have a second choice, it comes out of the taxpayer and not out of the large financial institutions. So let's frame the debate appropriately. The large financial institutions, because of inappropriate regulation and improper regulation during the Bush years, early the Clinton years as well, but mostly the Bush years, provoked a financial crisis. We began to deal with it in 2008, in the last months of the Bush administration, in a bipartisan way. We did it. We provided some funding in the first instance to those very financial institutions, not out of love for them, but because we thought that was needed to stabilize. The requirement is that any money spent under the TARP will ultimately be recouped by an assessment on the large financial institutions. Apparently the Republicans want to forget that one. They want to act as if it's a treasury, apparently because they can't bear the thought of telling the large financial institutions who were a large part of the cause of the financial crisis and benefited from our efforts to correct it, that they should have to pay. And we do know that when we said this program and programs to give money to municipalities, which they very much want, to buy up property that would otherwise fester because there would be nobody to make them take care of it, that they preferred that to be paid for by the taxpayer than by the large financial institutions. We'll give them a chance to correct that mistake. So I hope this bill is defeated, and next week we will have legislation that I hope our committee will be having hearings on and act on, which will reinstate the provision that says all of the 4 programs we're dealing with this week and next week will be dealt with in one of 2 ways. It will be financed by the TARP, and that money will be recovered when the program is over by an assessment on the large financial institutions. And the smaller amounts that will go to this program, that money will also be recouped from the large financial institutions. And those institutions which received hundreds of billions, they have repaid it, and it has been useful, but they were great beneficiaries of it. They caused some of the problem in general. They will be the ones that will bear the cost. So that's the choice. We have a choice of doing nothing to alleviate the impact of foreclosures on the overall economy, on municipalities, and on families, or of doing something and recouping that money from the large financial institutions. I hope that we will in the end decide that we were right to say that the large financial institutions can appropriately be asked to bear part of that burden. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished Majority Leader, the gentleman from Virginia.
Majority Leader, gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank the Speaker. Thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, for the past several years, the conversation in Washington has been about how much we can increase spending. Today, the debate is centered on how much we can increase savings. On November 2nd, voters sent a message that they will not sit by as Congress spends our way into national decline. It was a statement of rejection towards the buildup of debt and burdensome regulation that continues to cloud the prospects for the future. The new Republican majority has responded with a cut-and-grow agenda designed to produce results. We're cutting spending and job-destroying regulations and growing private sector jobs in the economy. Last month, we voted to cut spending down to 2008 levels. Today, through our U-Cut program, we offer American taxpayers the opportunity to recoup roughly $300 million in wasteful spending. The savings comes from terminating a program funded in the Dodd-Frank regulatory bill. This mandatory spending program allegedly provides loans to homeowners potentially facing foreclosure, but it is estimated that the subsidy rate, meaning the amount of the loan that will not be repaid, is 98 cents out of every dollar. So we are borrowing money we don't have to give loans to certain homeowners that can't repay, and that other American families will have to pay back in higher taxes in the future. This program truly does not make sense and leaves everyone worse off. At a time, Mr. Speaker, we must do everything in our power to balance the federal budget. This legislation must pass, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
How much time has been used on both sides?
The gentleman has 15 and a half minutes left, and the gentleman from Texas has 18.
And I will yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member for yielding time. I'm here today because this is a series of actions, all of which I oppose, that's in sequence, and I think we need to put this in perspective. Yesterday, my colleagues were proposing to terminate the FHA refinance program that helps people refinance mortgages under FHA. Next week, we'll be back on the floor out of our committee with a proposal that they have made to do away with the Community Stabilization Program, which is designed really to stabilize communities and keep people who own properties and are trying to pay their mortgages from seeing the values of their properties go down even further. And next week they'll be offering a proposal to do away with the Mortgage Refinance Assistance Program called HAMP. Of all of the 4 proposals, including the one we're here debating today, this, I think, is the most mean-spirited and most duplicitous one, and I think the one that most vigorously deserves to be opposed by my colleagues here in the House. Because this proposes to do away with a program that assists people who were employed, got a mortgage, were paying their mortgage, then lost their jobs to the downturn in the economy and found themselves in a position where they could no longer afford to pay their mortgage. These are not people who were out getting second homes. These are working people who had jobs, fell on bad times, and lost their jobs, and getting unemployment benefits. And all we're saying is give them a break for 12 months and give them the opportunity to go back into the marketplace and find a job, and then they can resume paying their mortgages. It is absolutely mean-spirited to say to somebody who has complied with all the rules, and lost their job by no fault of their own and then find themselves unable to pay their mortgages, that we won't try to give you some measure of relief. It's further complicated, made even more duplicitous, really, by a provision that has been inserted into this bill that directs the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to conduct a study and, based on that study, issue a report on the best practices that could be used to implement this program, a program which they are proposing to terminate. Why would you spend taxpayer money to have a study on the best practices to implement a program that the bill itself says is going to be terminated? A waste of taxpayer money. Yet, my colleagues are here representing to the members of this House and to the American public that their whole objective is to save the taxpayers' money.
Fired. Additional minute without objection.
I don't understand the rationale of my colleagues. And it would be something else if this bill was going to see the light of day in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. This is a message bill, Mr. Chairman. That's all this is about. Let's send a message to the American people that we can cut. We can cut. Whether we're cutting money that's taxpayer money or cutting money that's going to be paid out of the top fund that the law requires the biggest financial institutions in America to make the taxpayers whole if at the end of the day there is a deficit in repaying this money. It doesn't matter. Let's just stand up and beat on our chest and say to the American people and think that they will believe that we are doing something to save them tax dollars. This bill saves no tax dollars, and it's an abomination.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute, 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Graham.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Emergency Homeowner Relief Program Termination Act. And, I'm sitting here and I hear that we're mean-spirited. And it makes me think of the last year that I had with my father before he passed away. I spent a lot of time with my dad because I was taking him to the hospital. He had lung cancer. And we had to sit and wait, often more than an hour, to see the doctor to get his tests or to get his chemo. And I asked my father, knowing that his life was nearing an end, what was the toughest thing he ever had to do? My father told me the toughest thing he ever had to do was tell his children no. Sometimes when you're a child, you don't understand. You ask for things, and whether it be new hockey skates or a new baseball mitt or whatever it may be, and a good parent sometimes says they can't afford it. Well, I don't think it's mean-spirited to step up and answer the message, not that we're sending, but the message that the American people sent us, that we cannot continue reckless spending. And this program, to put it right back on point, this program is the poster child of waste and reckless spending. It's not me, it's not anyone in this chamber that said it's going to be subsidized 98 cents on the dollar. We will lose 98 cents on the dollar. The administration said that. 98 cents on the dollar. We cannot continue to spend on programs that are failing. That is the definition of waste. And we were sent here to cut the spending, to stop the waste, for one reason, so that we can grow the economy. And when we grow that economy, we actually create jobs. The whole point, if I understand the argument on the Democratic side, is that these people have lost their jobs.
How much time has expired?
30 seconds.
Additional 30 seconds to the gentleman
Gentleman's
from New
recognized
York.
for an additional 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chairman. And for that reason, the answer is not more failed programs. It's growing the economy and creating a job. We need to give them hope, not false hope. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Alabama reserves.
Mr. Chairman, could I inquire as to the time remaining on each side?
You have 15 and a half minutes, and the gentleman from Massachusetts has 10 and a half minutes.
I would prefer to reserve if I could, Mr. Chairman, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The
gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. 2 years ago, the President told us that we were all to blame for the housing bubble and the financial crisis that followed. Well, no, we're not. Those families who passed up the get-rich-quick real estate seminars and who turned down the loans that they couldn't afford, or who settled for a smaller home, or who rented because that's all they could afford, they're not to blame, and they shouldn't be left holding the bag. 91% of Americans are making their mortgage payments not only because it's the right thing to do, but because they know that the sooner the market corrects itself, the sooner their homes will begin to appreciate once again. By propping up bad loans and by undermining responsible homeowners, our government's extending the agony and postponing the day when the market stabilizes and home buyers can safely re-enter the housing market. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Alabama.
Gentleman, I believe there's still kind of a disparity, so if the gentleman wanted to go one more time.
Yes. This time, Mr. Chair, I recognize the gentlelady from West Virginia, Ms. Capito, for 1 minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I've been listening to the discussion. I certainly, over the last several years, have been in the committee where we've seen program after program being introduced to try to alleviate the problem that we know exists with the foreclosure issue. But this is about making choices today. This is about making choices about programs that are working, programs that are not working, programs that are costing too much, and programs that we need to reshape and reform. I believe this program is one that we can, in good measure, eliminate. It hasn't really gotten started. It's a billion-dollar program. And in some sense, we already know, and we've heard from many of the discussion, that 98 cents out of every dollar that's sent forth as a loan in this program will actually be a forgiven loan. Now, we're talking about fairness and mean-spiritedness. Is it fair to the rest of the folks who are working, scraping, paying their mortgages every single day to know that 98 cents of every dollar that goes out the door in helping some other folks is never going to come back in when the original agreement that is a loan? I think this is a good sense cut that will lead to more jobs and better sense government.
Gentleman from Massachusetts, recognized.
Well, I yield myself 15 seconds to note that I'm not surprised at that, because there are people on the other side who think it's unfair to pay the unemployed anything, like unemployment compensation. So, no, I don't think it's unfair to say to people who are unemployed in this economy that they will get some economic help, and that's what this is about. I now yield 3 minutes and 45 seconds to the gentleman from New York.
I thank the gentleman
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Okay.
3 minutes and 45? 3 minutes and 45.
I rise in opposition to H.R. 836. This is one of 4 anti-foreclosure programs that the majority is voting to terminate. And this particular program they want to terminate today is designed to assist homeowners who have experienced a significant reduction in income or at risk of foreclosure due to loss of a job, involuntary unemployment, underemployment, or a medical condition. And this is a group that needs our help. There are 1.2 million households with a mortgage where a head of household or spouse is unemployed. And in my home state of New York, Mr. Grimm, I wish I had had the opportunity to ask him, was he aware that 142,000 households in our home state have a mortgage with a person who's the head of the household or spouse is unemployed? and this program potentially could have helped those people. And the majority leader who spoke earlier, his home state, the great state of Virginia, there are over 59,000 households who have a mortgage and with someone in the family who is underemployed or unemployed. And in the great state of Texas, the largest number of households with a mortgage and a head of spouse or head of household who is unemployed, there are over 172,000 families in this terrible situation. Families across the country would benefit from the program, but instead they are cutting it. And I'd like to ask you unanimous consent to place in the record the census data that gives these numbers across our great country of the number of people in this situation who could be helped by this program.
The gentlelady's request has already been covered.
Thank you. The program fulfills an important gap because it addresses a temporary loss of income and helps homeowners when they are most vulnerable. It has been successful in Pennsylvania, which has its own state-run program. Over 45,000 homeowners have been assisted with an average loan of $11,000, and 85% of these recipients have been able to stay in their homes as a result. If we continued this program, we would be able to help families across the country. So I oppose terminating the program, and I oppose tossing hard-working Americans out in the street, and I oppose this mean-spirited effort to terminate help for unemployed Americans. Now, to put this in perspective, this program is one of 4 that the majority is putting forward to terminate programs that would help people stay in their homes. Yesterday, they terminated the FHA Refinance Program. Next week, they're going to attempt to terminate HAMP and the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. Yet economist after economist tell us that in order to strengthen our economy, we have to stabilize the housing market. So these cuts are wrong. They are wrong in the first place, and they're certainly wrong at this time when we are working to dig our way out of this hole and to get people back to work. This program, like the others, is narrowly tailored to help a specific class of homeowners because of this economy and because of the high level of unemployment. And during the financial crisis, we lost 7 million jobs in this country. And we're slowly gaining jobs again, but we're not even at the point where we're keeping pace with the workforce.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
My time has expired, and I urge a no vote on this bill.
I have no further speakers, Mr. Chair, on my side, and so I would like to, other than myself, so I'd like to reserve my remaining time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Mr. Green, the gentleman from Texas recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there's a more basic and fundamental question that we are confronting today. That question is, can we continue to go out of our way to help major corporations? And as a matter of fact, $700 billion. Can we go out of our way to help them and make sure that the programs work for them, and then turn our backs on the taxpayers that helped those very same major corporations? That's the basic question that we have to contend with. Are the banks and the major corporations too big to fail, and are the tax-paying Americans who help bail them out too small to help? Can we continue to end programs that help people stay in their homes that did not create the exotic products, that did not create prepayment inside with teaser rates, that did not create loans wherein you qualify for your adjusted, your teaser rate, but you don't qualify for your adjusted rate? Can we continue to allow them to be evicted when we can help some of them? We may not be able to help everybody, but when you can help somebody, you ought to try to do the best that you can and help those that you can. With reference to the FHA refi that passed, was ended yesterday by a vote of this House, that bill did not lose money unless persons failed to pay their mortgages. It was only if mortgages were not repaid that FHA came forward and covered the cost. So to say that it cost $8 billion is incorrect. It cost whatever at the end of the program may have been spent, but that money had not been spent. So the money was there. There was also a premium to be paid by persons who got the refis. FHA was going to help a lot of people stay in their homes and help a lot of communities and neighborhoods maintain their integrity and their property values. We today have an opportunity to help people with emergency mortgage assistance. People who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own because of this downturn in the economy. It is a very simple premise. Will we allow ourselves to save major corporations and deny the people, the tax-paying Americans, some help in their time of need? If there's one thing that I heard from American people was, where is my bailout? Well, when we come up to the plate and we try to help people who actually need and merit the help, somebody comes forward and finds a reason why we can't help them. This is the day to help those American people. Let's not let them be too small to help, while others will allow banks to be too big to fail. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from